Hello everybody, welcome back. In this video, we're going to talk about adding backgrounds to our games. We're going to do a few variations. We're going to start with a static background, then we'll add an infinitely scrolling background. And then at the end, we'll do a layered background to create this kind of depth parallax effect. So the video today is not actually specific to p5play. This could apply to any p5.js context, but because we're working with p5play right now, we're going to build an example kind of using p5play as our base. Okay, so let's start there. Okay, we're going to start by really quickly. We're not going to go over this again, but we're just going to include the p5play library, right? So always do that if you want to work with a library. We're going to add it to the source in our index file here. And we're also going to add a few assets to our project. Now, the assets are going to be linked in the description if you want to follow along. I have a few images here. I have a little pixel art airplane and some layers of backgrounds that we're going to be able to use for our demonstration. Okay. So let's go ahead and we're going to upload some files here. We're going to upload these assets to our sketch. Okay. I'm going to make sure they all appear to be uploaded correctly. Awesome. Okay, so we have some files that we can work with here. And so let's get our sketch started. We're going to start off by, instead of using, again, create canvas, we're going to say new canvas because we are working in p5play. And for this example, we're going to use the pixelated mode of p5play. So we'll say pixelated. And we're going to set the dimension of our canvas to match the dimension of our background. Okay. So we're going to start off with, these are the background we're going to use to begin with, these mountains. Okay. So the mountains, if I open my Explorer window here and look at the mountains, let's look at the properties of this file. We can see that these are the dimensions of the file, 384 by 216 pixels. So I'm going to make my sketch 384 by 216 pixels, just to kind of keep things simple. Okay, and we're gonna throw a. Let's go with a a background in there that's going to match our sky here. We're gonna go sky blue today instead of a black background. Okay. So before we talk about background, let's create an object that's going to exist in our sketch just for fun here. We're going to load this little pixel art airplane. We're going to attach it to a sprite, and we'll have that sprite follow our mouse. Okay? So let's make an object here. I'm going to call it airplane, and we'll also create a variable for the airplane image. We're going to implement the preload function so that our assets can load ahead of time, and we will say airplane image equals load image plane.png. So this is my image file here for my airplane. And then we're going to go in setup and we're going to say, let's make a new sprite, right? So our airplane is going to be a sprite. We're going to see it. Oh, what's happening here? Failed to fetch. Okay, let's check that our file is uploaded correctly. It's here. Seems to be doing that every time. Let's go and do the old solve here by doing a duplicate of our sketch. Okay, now it's happy. So for some reason, again, I have this problem often with the p5.js web editor. When I upload files, it actually doesn't find them right away. So usually I fix that by just copying my sketch, and that tends to fix the problem. So we have our plane here. This is our sprite. We're going to make it so that our airplane has an image, and we're going to assign the airplane image to it. There we go. This is our airplane. And then in draw, we'll do a simple little behavior here. We're going to say airplane move to, we're going to follow the mouse, let's say at a speed of 2. Okay. So now we have our airplane that's going to follow our mouse as we move the cursor. And we might as well also turn off the mouse cursor just for this example. Okay. Sorry, visible false, of course. I want to turn it off, not make it visible. Okay, so we didn't need to do that, but this is just so we have a little thing that we can control as we talk about creating backgrounds. Okay. So let's start with kind of the first layer of adding a background to our sketch. That's basically just going to be, let's have a static image as our background. So we are going to say, let's make an image here. Let's call it mountains. And I like to put image at the end, just so I remember that these are image variables. This is not something you have to do, but we'll do it just so that we are keeping our variable naming consistent. Okay. So here I have a few files to choose from. So we're going to get this glacial mountains.png as our first background. Okay. So let's load that image in preload. And just so we can test here, see that it works, we're going to go into our draw function, and we are going to draw the image. We'll say you just use the image. We're not going to create a sprite or anything like that. That's why I said this will work with p5play, but also just general p5.js sketches. We'll draw our mountain image at 0, 0. And because we've made the sketch the same size as our background, this is going to be pretty straightforward. Failed to fetch. Is the image existing? Yes. Did I make a typo here? No. Let's save. Maybe I'll try doing a refresh here. Play. Nope. All right, let's make a copy of our copy and move on. Okay, so now I have an actual error. Let me fix it. Backgrounds demo. I'm going to rename this just so it's a little clearer. So as I said before, I used mountains image as my variable name. So let's use that here as well. Okay. And I made a typo here in preload. Mountains. Okay, so mountains, mountains, mountains. There we go. Okay, so this would be the simplest kind of layer of adding a background to our game, right? Notice this is a transparent PNG that we're working with, so we can see the sky blue background through, and just draw an image, and then that becomes your background. And because p5play automatically just draws all the objects at the end of draw, they automatically appears on top. Okay? Or if we took over and changed the draw order by drawing the sprites manually, we could also decide where these sprites are going to appear. All right, so this would be a static background, pretty straightforward. Now, what if we wanted to create a scrolling background? Okay. Now, this particular image, by the way, this is where I got these images from itch.io. Thank you, Viniti, for making these available for free. So I got this parallax background package here that contained a few layers of backgrounds that we're going to use in today's demo. One properties that these backgrounds have is that they are designed to be able to scroll infinitely, which means the left side matches the right side. Okay? So if we wanted this image to scroll over time, right? The idea here is we simply need to, this is actually not very difficult to do. We just need to be able to change the X location of the image that we use as our background over time. So if you want to scroll to the left, we just need to decrease the X location of this mountain image. Okay? So let's go and make a variable here. I'm going to call it mountain X. Okay? Mountains X, so we're consistent. We're going to set it equal to 0 to begin with, and then in draw here, where we draw our background, let's replace 0 here with our variable. Okay? Now that we've made this a variable, we can actually animate this. It could be as simple as just subtracting 1 from it. Okay? So now we can see we have our image, our background is scrolling away. Okay? Now, eventually this background is going to move out of the frame. So what we could do is when that happens, we could just simply bring it back to 0. Okay. So let's say we're going to keep an eye on that scenario here. We'll say if mountains X is ever less than minus width, right? So when the X value of our background is so far away that we've reached negative the width of our window, we're simply going to snap it back to 0. And I'm going to keep making that typo today, so I'm going to be a little bit careful. So there we are. Okay, so we have our mountains here, and we're simply just moving it across the screen, and then when it gets too far, we're snapping it back to the original location. Now, you may notice this looks a little bit strange because we have no mountains happening over here as we scroll. Okay? So the simple fix to that is we can just simply draw our background twice. Okay, we're going to draw our background twice, one version over here and then another version immediately to the right. Okay, so we're going to draw the same image again, and because this is an image that's designed to be tiled, to be repeated, this is going to work. Okay, so we're going to say, let's put it over, we're going to say X, and then we're going to add the width of our window to it. Okay, so that these two images will be side by side. And then if we do this, now all of a sudden we get kind of a cool scrolling background, and this is going to give the illusion that our plane is moving forward, right? Even though we're just moving it following the cursor, it creates the illusion of this scrolling background. And just to make it super clear, like what's happening here, let's do a quick thing where we're going to apply a tint. I'm going to apply a blue tint to the first image and a red tint to the second image. Okay, just to make it really clear what the trick is. Okay, so we can see our blue image here is the first one, and we scroll left, and as soon as we get too far to the right, we snap it back. Okay, and as a result, our red one also snaps back. So essentially, we have two images that we're moving across, and then just kind of bringing back like this every time. Okay, but once these images are the same color, the illusion happens here, and we don't get to see the seam. Okay. All right. Now, there's some details here that's worth talking about. For example, this is convenient because we're moving the mountains here at a 1 pixel per frame speed. Okay, let's say we tried to vary this a little bit. Let's say we were like, okay, let's slow this down a bit more. We're going to go to like 1.7. Okay. Now, all of a sudden, this looks weird. Okay, because now we don't have an integer number of pixels that we're moving the mountains by. Okay, or we're trying to make our mountains go slower, right? And this is now starting to look a little bit strange. And we can see now there's a seam where our image is supposed to repeat. So there's a couple ways that we can address this, at least in p5play specifically. One is we're going to go at the beginning of our sketch here in setup, and we're going to say all sprites. Oh, actually, this is not a sprite. This is just a regular image, so we cannot say pixel perfect. What we're going to do is we're just going to make sure that when we draw those images, those background images, we don't try to draw them at kind of fractional locations. Okay? And here's what I mean by this. We're simply going to convert mountain X as we draw it to an integer. Okay, so we'll use int here. And the int function is kind of similar to we've used in the past floor to round down a number, or you could use round to round up. Int is just going to split the difference. It's going to either round up or down depending on how close we are to the nearest integer. And you'll see the difference here if I do that. Now the seam is gone. Okay, it still looks a little bit choppy just because it's pixel art. So if you go really, really slowly, there's no way around it. You're just going to moving 1 pixel at a time. So this scrolling background is going to look a little bit better if for backgrounds that are scrolling a little faster. But now, we could make our plane go faster. And if we did not do this integer here, again, I'm going to show you, right? The reason we want to do that is we want to make sure we always draw our background at integer locations, right? So no 0.5s, or we want to do 0 or 1 or 2 so that there's no gap in between those images. So we're not going to make this an integer because we still want to be able to have the in-between decrements here but when it's time to draw, we're going to convert that number to an integer using the int function. So behind the scenes, this number still has a decimal, so we can adjust the speed here, but when we draw it, it will appear, it will look nice on the screen. Very cool. All right. So this would be kind of the level 2 of doing a background here. We have a scrolling background. Of course, if you wanted to scroll up, right, it would be the same idea. You would just move your image along a different axis. You would move it along the y-axis, but it's the same concept. Now let's add another layer to this this background. Okay, let's say we wanted to do a parallax. Now, when you have a parallax, you basically have these multiple layers of background, and to get the depth effect, they simply just scroll at different speeds. Okay, the one that's furthest in the background is going to be the slowest, and the one that's closest to the viewer, to our eyes, is going to move the quickest, and that's going to create the illusion of depth. And in this case here, we have a few assets that we can work with to try to create that illusion of depth. Okay, so let's look at the files that we have. So we have this is the mountains we're using. Let's add the clouds. Okay, the clouds are going to happen in the background, right? So behind the mountains. So we're going to add another layer, so to speak, to our background scrolling. We're going to repeat the idea here with the clouds background. So let me copy the name of this file so I don't mess it up. So let's go and make some new variables here. Let's call this clouds, not clowns. Clouds image, and we're also going to create a variable for the X location of that background because we want those to scroll at different speeds. So in preload, I'm going to say clouds image. We're going to load image our clouds. Okay. And then in draw, we're going to kind of rinse and repeat this idea here. Okay. So this is what we were doing with the mountains. We're going to do the same thing with the clouds. Okay. So instead of mountains here, we're going to say clouds. And just to make it easier, I'm going to copy and paste. And instead of mountains X, we're going to say clouds X. Okay. All right, so we just repeat it here. And we're going to make the clouds go a little bit slower. So let's say the clouds are going to go at 0.5, and then the mountains, or I don't know, just 1, just to see. Okay, let's hit play and see what happens. All right, don't tell me we're getting this error again. The image is here. Gosh, this is very frustrating. The image is there. Okay, make a copy of our sketch. All right, there it is. Don't know why this is happening a lot today, but we'll just roll with it. So we can see now we have two layers, right? In the background, we have our clouds that are moving slowly, and then we have our mountain that is moving a little bit faster. Okay? So that kind of creates the illusion that we have a little bit more depth happening in our scene. Okay? And if you want this parallax effect to become a lot more convincing, it can be helpful to add a few more layers to this. Okay? If we look at the assets that we're using here, just to see the illustration, right, this asset pack actually provided us with 5 different images that we can use to build that parallax effect. We have the clouds kind of far in the distance, we have the mountains, and then we have 3 additional layers of clouds that we can kind of scroll and animate at different speeds to create an interesting effect. So let's go back to our sketch here. Now what we want to do is we'll want to load all 5 of these background layers. Okay? However, there's kind of a bit of a repetition happening here. Okay? We're starting to create some unfortunate code here if we end up copy and pasting this 5 times. I mean, we could make it work, right, just for this little demo. But as kind of the final iteration of this scrolling background, let's talk about how we would structure this a little bit better so that we don't have to do so much repetition in our code. Okay? So what we're going to do is we'll say, okay, well, this is the idea here. We want to take this concept, draw an image, right, animate it at a certain speed, okay? And then if that image goes too far, we're going to bring it back and reset its position. So we want to do that for 5 layers that we have. Each layer is going to have its own speed, okay? And each layer is going to have its own image. Okay? So in other words, each layer will have an image variable, a file name, and an X position. Okay? So instead of having these these variables here, let's imagine for a second, we're going to take out the clouds here just for a minute. And we know how to do that, so we'll take the clouds out. Let's imagine we're going to generalize this here to just be this concept of a layer as part of our background. Okay? So instead of being these separate variables, we're going to make an object. Okay? We're going to make an object, and we're going to define some attributes of that object. Okay? So maybe the first attribute of our layer is going to be what's the file that we want to use for that layer. So let's say we go with the let's go with the clouds. Okay, we're going to start with our clouds. We'll say this was the cloud background.png. Okay? So we're going to define an object variable, and we're going to group as attributes of that object all the data we need for this layer. Okay? So it's going to have a file. It's going to have an image object once we load that file. And for now, that image object is undefined. Okay, we'll just put undefined for now. It's going to have an X coordinate that we start at 0, and layer, excuse me, is going to have a speed. Okay, so let's say we'll make the first cloud layer go at a speed of 0.5. Okay? Let's get rid of this load image here. So what we can do now is, okay, we're going to load the image for that layer. So let's go and preload. We'll say layer.image equals load image layer.file. Okay? So the file attribute of the layer object contains our file name. And then we're going to put the image variable that we load from that file into the layer's image attribute. And then in draw, what we could do is we could say, instead of drawing these specific variables, we're going to say draw the layer image at layer x. Okay? Layer.x. And then we're going to repeat that over here, and you'll see why we're doing this in a second. Okay? What I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to kind of generalize this idea of having a background layer so that we can then automate the creation of these layers and the drawing of these layers using an array and a for loop. So instead of moving by 1.2, we're going to say, look at the speed of this layer, okay, and animate its x coordinate. Oh, I made a typo again. I don't know why I keep writing clowns. Just having a weird day today. Okay, so here's our clouds, this time represented as an object, right? So we've made a layer object. Here we've populated it with an image, and then in draw, it becomes a matter of using that object's attributes to do our thing and draw the background. Okay? So the benefit of approaching it this way is, let's say we wanted to add more layers. Well, we could imagine, instead of having this single variable, okay, let's get rid of these. Let's make this into an array. Okay. So here you can imagine we have an array here that has one object in it. Okay. Let's move the brackets down so we can see a little bit better what we're doing. Okay. So now I've created an array called layers, right? And currently at index 0, I have one object inside this layers array. Okay. So if we wanted to add a second one, we could simply say, let's add another layer. We're going to copy this little section here, put a comma, and then let's create a second object. Okay. This one, instead of clouds, maybe this is going to be, what was it called again? Glacial mountains. Okay. So this other layer will be called glacial mountains, and it's going to have a speed of, let's say, 0.75. Okay. So now we've made an array that has two objects in it, which means in preload, instead of loading one object, we can say, let's write a for loop. We're going to iterate over our layers, and then at each step of the way, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to say, take that layers file, put it into that layers image. Okay. And here I'm using the same variable name, so I don't have to change my code. Okay. So this is going to go over the two layers that we have, one at a time, and it's going to load the image for us. Okay. And then we can apply the same logic in draw. We can say, for every layer that we have created inside the layers array, we are going to draw that layer, animate its coordinate, and then when its coordinate gets too far, right, reset it. So the idea here, what I'm trying to do is show you how, with a little bit of planning, right, if we create our data structures with a little bit of planning in mind, we can really simplify the code that we have to write afterwards. Okay? So now I've created a structure where I can draw two layers, right, just with this one for loop. Okay? The benefit of doing this, again, is it's scalable. If we want to add the rest of our layers, right, because we have a few more layers that we could add here. We have 1, 2, and 3. We have these clouds, right? I have these different clouds. So let's start with 1. Okay, we're going to put that 1, then we'll put 2. Okay, actually, we're going to start, I think 3 goes in the back. So we'll say 3, 2, 1. Okay, so let's add 3, 2, 1. Oops, let's go back into our code here. So if I wanted to add more layers, right, we'll simply add more objects into our array. So take this structure here, copy and paste it. Now we're going to add another object in the array. This one is going to have a different file. We're going to say clouds mg3. And this cloud speed is going to go a little faster. Okay? So 1.3. And as we get closer and closer, we're going to increase the speed of the clouds. So just to test, we can hit play. Oh, come on, every time I try to load an image, we get that error. Oh, asset does not exist. Oh, that's me. I keep typing clouds the wrong way. Don't ask me why. Okay, now I have it correct. That's the right file. The file is there. The file exists. All right, let's just do them all three at once so that once we make our duplicate here, we won't have to keep making copies. So let's add clouds 2, right? And we'll simply just slowly increase the speed. And then we're going to add clouds 1. And clouds 1 is going to be the fastest. Maybe it goes to a speed of 2. Okay. Still unhappy with us, so we're going to make a copy of the sketch. I hope this gets fixed in new iterations of the editor, but we have to live with this for today. So now, okay, so I've copied my sketch to fix the missing files glitch. And we can see here I was able to add, right, 3 layers simply by just extending my array. We're just adding more objects into the array, right? They're all using the same structure, a file name, an image variable, a variable to keep track of their location, and we can vary their speed. Okay? So this way now I can create this multiple layers of background, and then I don't have to add, copy, and paste here and to draw. I just let the for loop do the work for me. And we could go back and basically insert, let's add, we also have this this lonely cloud here image. This one is just a single cloud floating across the screen. Let's add that one too, because we have it. We're going to put that one in between the clouds background and the mountains, which means I'm going to go here and I'm going to make another object, right? I can copy and paste, or I could just write it again. This is going to be lonely clouds. I'm creating the image as undefined because we load it in preload, but we start at 0. And this one, let's say, actually, we'll give that one a speed of 0.75, and we'll change the mountains to have a speed of 1. So it's a bit more of a progression. Once again, let's duplicate this. Don't know why it's doing that today, because my asset is there. So now we have this this cloud here by itself, just adds another layer of interest to our scene. And here we have it. So 3 different iterations on this idea of scrolling backgrounds. We can, or just backgrounds in general. We saw in step 1, we just had a static background where we simply match the size of our image to the size of our canvas, right? So that's kind of the easy way to approach this. Then we made that background scroll by drawing it twice, side by side, and having one variable control its X location. And we just make it snap back when we go too far on the left side, and same idea would work up and down or to the right. Okay. And then finally, we made this a little bit more advanced by adding layers, right? Kind of parallax layers, which are simply just layers moving at different speeds from slowest to fastest as you get closer to the camera. And to make our lives easier, we spent a little bit time up front defining a data structure, an array of objects that represents each of our background layers. And then this allowed us to have much simpler code in preload, where we could automate the loading of the images, and in draw, where we could automate the drawing of the layers by leveraging for loops. Okay. All right, so that's it for this video on backgrounds. Hopefully you found that useful. And again, thanks again to user vnitty for making this awesome parallax background available on itch.io. All right, take care, everybody. See you in the next one.